Good afternoon and welcome to Philanthropy Impact's Walking My Shoes series for professional advisors, where today we are discussing how to meet the needs of the next generation of clients. My name is Zofia Sochanik and I'm the moderator for this series of carefully curated, short and informative sessions to help you navigate the philanthropy and impact investment space. I'm also part of the team here at Philanthropy Impact, so if you'd like to know more about our services and the benefit of membership for you and your firm, then please do get in touch with me directly. I'll share my email during and at the end of the session. We do try to keep these discussions really to 30 minutes, so they go quickly, but we encourage audience interaction. So please use the chat to introduce yourselves, have your say and pose questions to our panel. Please make sure to select panel and all attendees or everyone when posting in the chat so that all can see. It's now time to welcome and thank our chair for today, our board member George King, who's partner at MASECO Private Wealth, and he's joined by Stephanie Brobbey, who's the founder and director of the Good Ancestor movement, Pippa Garland, who's a partner of the charity and social business team at Cooke, and philanthropist Lily Lewis, who's the founder and CEO of the Procressi initiatives. I hope I've said that right. Thank you all so much for your time and your insight today, and I will now hand over to you, George, to kick off the discussion. Thank you.
Fantastic. That was like lickety split. Okay. So thank you, Zofia. Welcome, everyone. We continue to try and tackle topics that take way more than half an hour and squeeze them into these half-hour time frames. So recognize that this is an acknowledgement of an important topic and, let's say, just a part of a much larger conversation. And just make sure we all are here for the same conversation, which is understanding and talking about the role that professional advisors can play, should play, in helping to advise the next generation. And we sort of think of that quite broadly. I think most of you know Philanthropy Impact. The whole point is about trying to encourage more and better philanthropy and impact investing across that whole spectrum, and is primarily working through intermediaries to accomplish this. So this seems like something that's really, right down our alley. And as a result, we have a really wonderfully diverse range of perspectives of people on this topic. And I thought I would start with Pippa as an intermediary advisor herself to give just a quick introduction of herself and her work and her perspective on the topic as we get going.
Hi, thank you, George. So as Zofia said, I'm a partner in the Russell Cooke's charity and social business team. So we're a legal advisor to charities and philanthropists, helping them on their charitable giving. I'm also part of our family office team. So we work with family offices across different generations and pull together the private client, the reputational management, the family law, all of the different aspects. In terms of my credentials to speak on this particular topic, I'm also just about a millennial and just been named a next generation partner by Legal 500. So yeah, I'm very much of the next generation. Being a millennial, I know the dangers of tarnishing a whole generation with generalizations, but I think as an advisor, this next generation is going to be the future of philanthropy and the future of everything. So if you ignore them, it's at your peril in terms of your ongoing practice.
I think that's a great intro and really useful perspective, so we know where you're coming from. And congratulations, by the way. And so let's turn quickly to Lily for an introduction from the other side of the spectrum as a philanthropist, and then we'll come to Stephanie to wrap up our intros. But Lily, let me kick it to you to give your perspective on the topic to get us started.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, so I guess a bit of background on me. My organization is a subsect of my family foundation. I work specifically with grassroots organizations, Black and brown mostly led, that are working to kind of disrupt and offer alternatives to the criminal justice system and addressing youth violence and childhood trauma. I'm a training psychotherapist, and I also do workshops for white people around race and kind of privilege and all that fun stuff. Yeah, and really looking forward to talking about the uncomfortable issues that we don't really want to lean into.
Oh yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. And Stephanie, let's just round out the intro so everyone understands sort of your perspective on the topic as well, and then we'll dive into it.
Thanks, George. I'm Stephanie Brobbey. I practiced as a private wealth lawyer at Goodman Derrick for a decade. And in September, I launched the Good Ancestor movement, which is an organisation which exists to disrupt kind of mainstream private wealth advisory services by challenging traditional ideas about the economy, about excessive wealth accumulation, tax minimization, and the redistribution of resources and power. We're a consultancy. We support individuals and families and also charitable foundations with radical wealth redistribution, with a real emphasis on shifting control and capital back into communities and building up local economies. And I'm also a card-carrying geriatric millennial.
Is that a category? Interesting. Okay.
Oh yeah, there's an article on it. I'll send you later.
Okay. So thank you to all three of you. And actually, Stephanie, I'll stay with you first, but let everyone chime in on this introductory question. But at its core, the real question is essentially, is there the right level of advice, guidance, assistance, support being made available by a broad range of professional intermediaries for the work that, for example, you're doing, and you've been, on both sides of this, and to some degree, you're acting in this role for others. How do people find you? How do you decide how much? How do they decide how much support they need, and how do you offer it? So just calibrating how to actually start to deliver this stuff. Is it happening, and what have you seen there?
Yeah, I mean, I came to this work, I suppose, I practiced for 10 years, and I could see that within my role as a lawyer, the constraints of the legal profession meant that I wouldn't be able to have the impact that I wanted to have, the kind of wider advisory role when supporting people to think through their impact, the impact that they want to have through the redistribution of their resources. And, I guess having been involved in philanthropy and social impact and social justice for a long time, I became more politicized effectively around certain underlying kind of structural issues relating to the problems that philanthropists are often wanting to solve, and was really kind of captivated by the possibilities ahead of us through the Great Wealth Transfer, which is the largest intergenerational wealth transfer in human history, as we know. And I began to see that actually, as my role as a lawyer in the private wealth sector meant that I operated in this system, which is basically fueled by two dominant narratives, being excessive wealth accumulation and tax minimization. And over the years, I've been coming into contact with not exclusively next generation clients, many of the current generation who are increasingly feeling uncomfortable about the level of wealth that they have, and wanting to develop a more positive relationship to taxation. And kind of the feedback that consistently came back to me was that there was no role in the advisory industry. There was nothing within the advisory industry that would support them to stop accumulating so much wealth. Of course, it's very countercultural, our approach, and that's why we've come in to disrupt and support this particularly progressive group of wealth holders to think through how much wealth they actually need, how much is too much, how much is enough, and to start thinking about developing a more positive relationship to taxation. So fundamentally challenging some of the assumptions that we work with.
There's a lot in there, and I suspect that some of these notions are exactly some of the things that some people in the wealth industry would fear. The idea that, oh my God, you're getting money out of the system. This is not what we want to have happen. But you've raised a lot of useful things there. Let me turn to Lily and ask, in the process of putting together and creating the initiative you've done, did you get support? Did you have to find it? Was it offered to you? Was it enough? What was your sort of professional support journey like?
I mean, I think first off, what Steph is creating, for me, it was unheard of in the UK. I have spent the majority of the last 5 years starting my career in this field in the US, because there just didn't seem to be anything filling the gap that exists in the UK, right? And this is the same for so many different areas within charity and philanthropy. But I remember approaching a wealth kind of advisor at Deloitte years ago, just basically saying, can you introduce me to someone else kind of like me? And then the team at JP Morgan were helpful in making some kind of connections. But in terms of actually evaluate what it means to examine what it is to redistribute power and wealth and what that can look like and how that needs to be challenged, both for me internally and externally through all the different mediums I have access to, I haven't found any people, any kind of organizations really in the UK. It took me years to find other kind of next gens within kind of this network to build community with, to find people like Steph. And now it's kind of picking up, and I think it's really exciting, but the word isn't kind of fully out yet, right, for a lot of people.
Yes, I can imagine. So let me come back around to Pippa. So if you are hearing these conversations, can you imagine turning to each and every one of your clients and saying, shall I give you advice about how to not accumulate wealth? Given the types of conversations you're usually having and the types of questions that people usually come to you with, which would probably be the inverse of this, how do you remain open to these types of conversations? How do you both seek to offer help and just seek to offer, different perspectives that they might not even know are available? As a professional, hearing this conversation, how do you react?
Well, I think it's brought up quite a lot in terms of potentially the limitations that sometimes advisors feel themselves under, and also from what Lily said, the real need, what the next generation are perhaps looking for, has changed. I'm probably personally quite lucky, and I already work in the philanthropy space. So when people come to me, they are often already on that journey, so I can help them. But someone in the kind of much more private wealth management space, it won't necessarily come as naturally. But I think it's knowing that the next generation are very open to having these conversations. And I think one of the perhaps distinguishing factors about the next generation is they don't just see philanthropy as something on the side, that they only talk to their philanthropy advisor and everything else they do is not impacted by it. They're much keener to live their whole lives in alignment with their values. And I think that means there's far more ins and conversation openers for advisors. So it's not just about, okay, what are you thinking about your charitable giving? Do you want to do some volunteering? It's, well, how are you going to invest? How are you going to behave as a consumer? What's your business doing when it comes to incorporating ESG? Have you thought about, what you could be doing to support the Sustainable Development Goals? There are a lot more conversations to be had. And I think what Lily said, and what you kind of valued and what we were looking for in an advisor, perhaps advisors need to move away from just being the implementers to really supporting their clients much more holistically. So can you share your connections? Can you really listen to what they want and try and support them on that journey? And part of that will be talking about values, which I think does become a little bit more uncomfortable to people who are very much previously focused on just implementing.
And can I get all of you to spend a little more time on that topic? I think it would be really interesting to hear, what good looks like. So you gave a couple of quick examples there. Pippa, Lily, you talked about sort of people sharing their networks, but you have a lot of people on this line directly, and then contact networks that extend quite extensively across a wide range of areas that wealth management, law, philanthropy, all sorts of areas here. It'd be useful to get to dig a little deeper into, well, what help, what assistance, is good, right? Is sought after, is missing, should there be more of, etc. So let me ask for further thoughts on that, which I think is really a helpful takeaway from this call.
Just to kick it off, I think another kind of distinguishing factor about next generation is they're much more willing to innovate. I think they kind of look to previous decades of philanthropy and said, well, the problems are still there. And I think that's where advisors, you know, you're advising a broad range of people doing all sorts of things. You can introduce those innovations to people, to your new clients. Say, well, have you thought about doing it in this different way? This has been successful for this individual. So I think supporting clients through sharing kind of innovations in the sector can be particularly useful for the next generation who are perhaps less happy to just continue doing the status quo of traditional big check philanthropy.
Innovation / best practice sharing, just sort of certain other options. Yeah. Okay. Steph, Lily, other ideas to add to that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you raised a good question, in which I was talking to a new client about this last week, and it was about, well, what does it mean to do good, and what does good mean, and who gets to define what good means actually in the context of, you know, one's positional power as someone with wealth and privilege in the world, who's seeking to make an impact, who's seeking to generate social change. Who gets to define that? And I think there's something about people, you know, the advisory community actually stepping out of even this community. I think, you know, with certain environmental issues and issues of inequality, the people that can really speak to that and to speak to what good looks like are people on the front lines, people leading grassroots organizations, activists, social movements. And so bringing in those voices is, I think, it's going to be really important as we begin to kind of reshape the way that we advise next generation clients. But also, one of my mentors said to me a few months ago that people that work in professional services tend to be anxious overachievers. And I think that's so true. And I was reflecting on my own experience as an advisor. And of course, you know, I wouldn't want to bring up something with a client that I didn't feel I could really answer, or I didn't feel that I could meet their need by introducing them to someone or making a connection. So I think there needs to be a lot more freedom to, as Pippa was saying, you know, innovate and to actually treat it as a bit of an experiment that we're all working towards, you know, this common goal of what does good look like? What should good look like in 2021? And how do we mobilize resources towards that?
Yeah, I think that's some really good points in there. And I'll share that, you know, most people in the call probably know, but Philanthropy Impact does a lot of training of advisors in this area, because exactly as you say, because if it's something unfamiliar, then you're very uncomfortable raising it, beginning to try and engage around it at all, and so forth. So that opportunity to, sort of in a safe environment, to learn at base level, to know that you know something, to know that it's okay what you don't know, you can access other networks, other professionals, et cetera, to fill that in, and therefore be able to at least raise and engage in these conversations with the people you're advising. It's absolutely a critical piece. Lily, you may want to jump in and feel free to do so, but I'm really curious, because let's just pretend that not everyone in the world is going to be completely altruistic about trying to achieve the best good, whatever good is defined by whom. And some of them might be slightly more self-centered and self-preserving in their outlook. And hearing some of the conversation, you know, if you think about the different types of professional advisors out there, if you're a charitable advisor, this is right up your alley. You're happy to have this conversation. You want to do this. If you're a lawyer, maybe you want to have this conversation. You're still going to have work structuring this activity and so forth. I suspect if you're a wealth advisor, you're going to hear a lot of this conversation and feel very uncomfortable. I'd love to get the perspective of everyone in terms of, from a self-interested perspective, help other professionals understand why this is something they should be doing, not just because the person wants to hear it, but it's actually good for the advisor themselves to be engaging with the next gen in this way. Who wants to take a stab at that?
I mean, I think, as Stephanie alluded to, you know, there is going to be this great wealth transfer. These are the future clients. So I think what they're looking for from advisors is different. They do want to have these conversations. They want to be values-led, potentially. And so engaging with them on that level can only be good for you and your practice. Otherwise, you know, your practice is going to end up dying out with your previous generation of clients. I think from the wealth management point of view, that's perhaps a little bit trickier. And people do come to me as a philanthropy lawyer saying, you know, obviously we haven't had these conversations with people who want to keep our funds under their control. I suppose you look at the broader picture, and if you don't start engaging with all of this generation, you're ultimately going to lose out, even if you do hold on to a little bit more of wealth of one or two of your clients.
Yeah, yeah. Anyone else want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to jump in and just say that, you know, the work that the Good Ancestor movement is very, very much on the more radical end of the spectrum in what we're supporting. And that's, you know, not necessarily by any means reflective of the average next gen client, whatever that may look like. But I think it's critical to realize that there is a spectrum of, you know, different approaches and different stances towards what good looks like, what wealth redistribution should look like, what good wealth stewardship should look like. Pippa was talking about the more holistic approach that next generation clients tend to espouse. And I think whether or not, you know, the elephant in the room is that, you know, we don't want, you know, we're concerned about our business models and wealth being taken away. But I think this wealth transfer is coming, and it's about recognizing there is a spectrum that's going to apply to different clients, and we need to be inclusive, and we need to find ways to support, you know, the proportion of clients that have, you know, radically different views and want to be advised in a different way.
Yes, that's really well said. There's a question in the chat about modeling a constructive partnership for good philanthropy. I'll let you all take a look at that and decide how to respond while I make a comment on this last question as a wealth advisor. And I guess the comment I would share with the broader audience on this is, you know, ultimately our job as advisors is essentially to ask the question, what is this wealth for? And then try to help accomplish the answer to that in the best way. So it's not my job to say, no, don't give that money away to your kids. No, don't give it away to this charity. No, don't spend that much. Leave more of it with me to manage. That's not my job in any of those areas. My job is to help the clients achieve the goals that they are passionate about, that they care and need with their wealth. So that has to be broad and inclusive, as you're saying, Steph. And ultimately, the long-term, if you think about business models, the long-term value of clients is in the long term. So it's not that you get an extra dollar from them or an extra pound from them in or out of the pocket of what you're managing. It's that they're with you for 20 years, not 2. And I think the point you all were making, that if you don't do this, you're simply going to lose those clients. You'll lose the clients or the kids of those clients and so forth. If instead you constructively remain in the advice center of what's important to them. So the value of that client, if I lose 50% of the assets but keep them for 20 years, is dramatically more than if I keep those assets for 2 years and they leave because I can't engage with them and help them around these issues. That's how I think about it, and why I think it's not just the right thing to do, but it's actually in my self-interest professionally to be able to help with all of this type of thing. Does anyone have a response they want to give to the question in the chat about?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And also just to kind of follow up on what you just said, I agree with it, but I also kind of want to throw a spanner in the works a little bit. I guess I'm just wondering, like, as the world is continuing to be more and more kind of disrupted in negative ways, and as we're seeing that kind of more on social media, and as younger generations are kind of more involved with that constant absorption, right, of that reality and experiencing that existential kind of fear and urgency, our values, I think, are becoming potentially kind of more extreme. And as kind of has been touched on by both kind of Pippa and Steph, we're wanting to live our whole life through the lens of these values, and we can be quite passionate about that. And so for me personally, I don't want to be working with people who are vague. I want to be working with people who are absolutely valued aligned and kind of see their life and the purpose of their work in the same way that I do. And when I think about my other kind of friends and support system who are fellow next gens in kind of a similar place in their giving and values to me, the thing that we dread most within our work is contacting our financial advisors. It's not that we are not ready to do A, B, and C within our portfolios. It's not that we don't want to. It's because we hate the conversations and we feel really, really uncomfortable in a lot of those dynamics. I think especially it can be gendered as well for women. We experience being talked over a lot by our male advisors who our dad's dad put in place for us or whatever it is. And it's really, really difficult. And it doesn't feel like a space where we're being heard. And it doesn't feel like a space where we're all thinking about accountability and power and what those structures could look like together. I want to feel like I'm on the same journey with the people I'm working with in whatever area of my life that is. And obviously that's a massive luxury, but right now it doesn't really exist. And so I think a lot of progressive next gens are just feeling overwhelmed by it and are therefore almost dissociating from a lot of the work because they don't want to do it with people they feel uncomfortable around. What is the alternative?
Yeah, that is a really great shout. And we're doing our little piece to try and move the needle with all of the training sessions we do with wealth advisors about trying to have engage their clients in these conversations about living their values and doing that through their wealth in whatever way that is and so forth. But it's we could run a session every day and it would take forever to convert the whole industry. So that's a really, really important point you're making. Steph, Pippa, did you want to add anything else before we get to a last sort of question?
I suppose just going back to why advisors need to engage with this. I mean, Lily's tells surely the cautionary tale that everyone needs to hear. If you don't, this next generation are not going to go to you. They're going to go to peers and just distance themselves from professional advisors. You need to be clear on what your values are, and hopefully they align with your clients. Otherwise, as Lily says, that this next generation are just not going to engage with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lily, there's a question in the chat for you. I'll just let you take a look at that when you have a minute. And I'll just give you a heads up as we come to close. I'm going to just ask each of you if there's a call to arms or a call to action you would like to sort of voice to this crowd, for this crowd to go and amplify into the world. That feels like a nice way to bring this incredibly abbreviated skimming the surface of this very important topic, but at least it's a useful thing to take out into the world. Lily, did you want to respond to the chat first?
Yeah, I don't quite understand it. I'm wondering if it could be phrased in another way that I'm not quite getting it.
I think that it's asking if this is, so Charlotte comes from NGO. So I think that she's asking whether or not that's something that they can do. If actually there is a place where they could be, I hope this is right, Charlotte. It's asking if there's a role for them to look to work directly with next gens in that way and on offer that as a brokerage service, kind of, can we give the advice? Yeah, I think that's the question. Which for charity, in terms of for charities, of how to give in philanthropy and all
yeah, I mean, that's what I did. I didn't work with advisors. I went straight to organizations on the ground, and I spent 2 years working with them and trying to learn from them, which is debatably sometimes not a good idea because maybe I was taking away some of their time where they could have just been spent getting on with it. But I always think that getting experience on the ground and really understanding these issues and spending time with people on the ground as much as possible is important. But I would say, I guess, is just like a closing thing from my side. I'm curious as to what the future will be within this specific sector. Because we are now as next gens making our own communities to kind of advise each other and to really challenge each other and hold each other accountable, like resource justice and resource generation. And yeah, so watch out. I think if we're not doing the work, we're just kind of going to move on.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Pippa, a final word, a quick call to action as we sign off.
I think don't be scared. The think about your own values, think about sharing those with your clients. Don't be scared to share those with your clients and feel like you just have to be chameleon and reflect the values of whoever is in front of you, because I think that's the way you're going to actually engage with this next generation and help them out, rather than allow them to go off on their own and only be able to learn from peers, which is super valuable, but I think there's still a place for advisors. That's
great. Great final comment. Steph, last word for you.
Yeah, I think there's an invitation here to come and inhabit the world of the next gen, you know, whatever that looks like, the more progressive spaces, the, you know, more impact investor driven spaces, whatever there are. I think I would encourage people, you know, advisors to step out of their worlds and really to become curious about what's on the horizon.
Brilliant. And as the old fogey in the room, I got to say, I'm very, very pleased to hear what all of you are doing. It fills me with hope and inspiration. And, you know, I guess I'll say also with my philanthropy impact hat on, you know, everyone is hearing that this is happening and needs to happen better. So, you know, don't be complacent. Gain the tools, gain the skills, gain the contacts, gain the language to engage with this. It's happening. You just need to be able to do it and do it better. So with that, Zofia, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thanks everyone. It was a brilliant session, really great to hear. And Lily, I mean, what you're saying is exactly what we're trying to teach here. So there is good news for advisors out there that we are offering. This is a shameless plug, I'm totally off message, John will kill me. But we do training in this area specifically in how to start to understand the needs of the next gen, how to match them, how to meet the values. And so please do come to us for that. That's what Philanthropy Impact is here for. So thank you, Lily, for that. That was really great insight. And thank you, Steph and Pippa, for that. And George for doing such a great job chairing again. We are back next Monday, where we'll be looking at catalysing investment in mental health. What's next for philanthropy and impact investing? So I hope to see you all there. And also apologies to anyone that had issues with the link this afternoon. We seem to have had a couple of issues there, but the recording will be sent out. All right, thank you very much. And sorry it's run over. Bye, everyone.